الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبا القاسم محمد طب القلوب ودوائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ قلنا للملائكة اسجدوا لآدم فسجدوا إلا إبليس أبى واستكبر وكان من الكافرين. The first of our loud salawat in honor of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The second in honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. Third, with your loudest voices, in honor of Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. Respected scholars, brothers and sisters of Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Arrogance or pride is recognized as one of the most important characteristics seen in many human beings around the world throughout history. And indeed, it's a characteristic which is examined on a broad spectrum, where we see that many of the world's religions examine arrogance or pride, and indeed many of the world's philosophies, and indeed many of the theories of morality come forward with an opinion about the meaning of arrogance and defining it within the lifestyle of the human being. Arrogance within the religion of Islam is seen as a spiritual disease, and highlights the fact that the religion of Islam portrays diseases in two lights. There are either physical diseases in the life of the human being, or there are spiritual diseases. The idea is that when one examines both of these types of diseases, there is a need for a person to purify both of them. Otherwise, they act as an impediment in the person's progress. You witness, for example, when a person has a physical disease or a physical ailment, the person goes about trying to find a cure for this disease. In some cases, going to great lengths and indeed spending a lot of money in order that that disease is cured. For example, we recognize that when we have a disease or we have a virus or we have an infection on a physical nature, for example, when we look at migraine, or you have diabetes, or you have cholesterol, or you have asthma, when you have this physical disease, the human being looks to purify it. Why? Because the human being knows that this disease will not allow him to progress. But as soon as the disease is cured, then the person is able to make progress in their lives. You find that the human being will go to the specialist consultant for his physical diseases. If his wife, for example, has a problem in pregnancy, the human being is willing to go to great lengths to ensure that that disease is cured. Yet the problem with many human beings in the world today is that while there is a stress on curing the physical diseases, there isn't enough of a stress on curing the spiritual diseases. When we talk of spiritual diseases, what do we talk of? Many of you who may have seen the film Seven, involving Mr. Pitt and Mr. Freeman, would have seen within that film that there are 7 sins which may be seen as spiritual diseases. Or indeed, you find that spiritual diseases come under different headings, yet each one of us may have gone through many spiritual diseases. For example, envy is a spiritual disease. Gluttony is a spiritual disease. Hypocrisy is a spiritual disease. Arrogance is a spiritual disease. All of these fall under the headings of spiritual diseases, and highlight the need for the human being to purify these. Why? Because the human being seeks equilibrium between his soul and his physical aspects. There is no point a person being physically pure but lacking in spiritual growth. And there is no point a person being spiritually pure but without any physical strength. Islam came to balance both our physical needs and indeed our spiritual needs. That's why you find, for example, with envy. Envy is a spiritual disease. Yet envy can act as an impediment in allowing you to find happiness. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullah wa salamu alayhi narrates about the travels of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. He states that when Prophet Isa used to travel, he used to have with him a disciple, a very short disciple, who used to travel alongside him. And so wherever Prophet Isa would go, the disciple would be alongside him. Prophet Isa, as you know, he used to have a form of transport which many of us don't have access to, and that is walking on water. It helps. And so what happens is with Prophet Isa and his disciple, they would come to a river. Prophet Isa would know that while I can walk across water, these guys are going to take ages until they take the boat to come across. So he used to tell them that recite Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and then you'll be able to walk across water with me. This disciple of his used to travel across the water with him all the time. Yet on one occasion, as he was traveling across the water, he suddenly fell within the water. Nabi Isa looked at him and he wondered, why did you just fall in the water? Come, he picks him up again and they continue walking. He asks him again, why did you just fall in the water? The companion replied, because there was a moment where I was envious of you. I said, what do you mean? He said, because when I was able to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and walk across water like you, I thought to myself, what makes him more superior to me? Straight away Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made me fall. And the idea therefore here in this particular spiritual disease is that envy acts as an impediment, that however envious you become of a certain group of people, the reality is that it will only bring depression to you, not towards them. They'll continue in their life. Yet the reality is it affects you. Look at another example, an example like gluttony. Sunan Abu Dawood al-Nasa'i has the Sunan. Our brothers in Ahlul Sunnah have 6 holy books, 6 books of hadith, Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Abu Dawood, and Ibn Majah. Sunan al-Nasa'i. If you go and read it, you will look at the biography of al-Nasa'i. Al-Nasa'i was a person who used to be amongst those who used to praise Amir al-Mu'mineen. And therefore, many of the followers of Bani Umayyah were unhappy. How is it that this person praises Ali ibn Abi Talib and doesn't praise Muawiyah? So on one occasion, he was called towards those enemies. And when he was called, he was asked the question that we see in your writings, there is a lot of praise for Ali, but none for Muawiyah. He says, well, there is nothing to write. Again they ask, again he says there's nothing to write. On the third occasion he says, the only praise there is of Muawiyah from Rasulullah is that Rasulullah said, however much Muawiyah eats, his stomach will never be full. So they asked him, narrate the merits of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He said, if I start from now until the day of judgment, narrating the merits of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the pen would not cease to write. Here in this way, he highlighted that gluttony was the cause of the man's history. The man's downfall, when we remember him, gluttony was the spiritual disease that he has. So much food coming into the palaces of Bani Umayyah without any proper ammunition, leaving those palaces. Therefore, when you look at the spiritual disease, there is a need to understand each of the spiritual diseases and their basis. And indeed, arrogance is one of the spiritual diseases that is probably the oldest spiritual disease in the history of mankind. And arguably the most important verse when examining arrogance is to look at the king of arrogance himself. Because when you examine the king of arrogance, he provides you with an understanding of the meaning of takabbur. And then he allows you to see the aspects of takabbur, the definition of takabbur, and the cure for takabbur. The verse which I have chosen is verse 34 of Surah 2 of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah. And the verse comes forward and says, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ. We said to the angels, prostrate to Adam. فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا Iblis. They all prostrated except Iblis. أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. He removed himself. He became arrogant, istakbara, وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And he was one of the disbelievers. When we dissect this verse, we are able to define arrogance in the way it should be defined, in the way the ulama of akhlaq define arrogance. How do we examine this verse? The first examination, what are the different types of sujood in Islam? Because here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, O angels, prostrate to Adam. Can we do sujood to a human being? Or is that shirk? Question number 1. Number 2, was Iblis of the angels or not? Number 2. Number 3, what does Allah mean when He says, Aba wastakbara? What is the meaning of takabbur here? And how do we define takabbur according to the other Quranic verses? When you examine this, you'll be able to see how takabbur is defined. Let's begin with the first examination. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ. We said to the angels, perform sujood to Adam. When you look at this aspect, the question arises on the lips of many people as to the fact that how come the angels were ordered to do sujood to a human being? The idea that many people say that sujood should only be done to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet here the Quran shows us a clear example of angels doing sujood to a human being. When we look at the religion of Islam, when the religion of Islam looks at veneration or honoring, the religion of Islam has allowed us to honor certain personalities and has told us not to honor certain personalities. Let me give you an example. When I honor my teacher, am I committing shirk? If I come now and praise my teacher, if I come now and say the credits of my teacher, if I come now and kiss the hands of my teacher, am I committing shirk? Am I putting a partner to Allah? No. I am not worshipping the teacher. I am coming and venerating the teacher because the teacher is a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we find Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamu alayhi stating that whoever teaches me one letter has become a master to me. Yeah, Ali ibn Abi Talib mentions the point that when a teacher teaches you one letter, he has become a master to you. Likewise, our fourth Imam comes forward and states that the right of the teacher is what? The right of the teacher is you give them eye contact, number one. Number two, he states that the right of the teacher is that when people speak ill of the teacher behind his back, you go and defend him. Number two. Number three, when you want to ask your teacher a question, wait in line. Islam says there's no problem venerating a teacher. You are not committing shirk in your veneration of the teacher. Rather, what you are doing is you are venerating a teacher because it's obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there are other areas in the religion of Islam where we can't venerate. For example, can we honor the idols? No. The religion of Islam states that when a person now comes and does sujood before idols, this person has now committed shirk. One type of honoring is acceptable, the second is not. That's why in Arabia there's a beautiful story about a man who used to have an idol in his house. What this man would do, he'd always come, he'd polish his idol, and then he'd leave the house, go to work. The Arabian kids, quite naughty characters, would come and they'd pick up the date stones, and they'd throw the date stones on his idol, and his idol would fall. When he'd come back home, he'd see the idol on the ground. He'd pick it up and start polishing it again. And he'd say to it, you should protect yourself. And again, he'd put it up, do sujood to the idol, and leave the house. Arabian kids come again, let go, the idol falls again. Until eventually he came back into the house, he saw the idol on the ground. He said, how can I be prostrating before a God which cannot even defend itself, let alone defend me? Here the idea is what? That there is one aspect of Islam that allows us to honor certain people. But then there is other aspects of Islam which say that certain types of veneration can lead to shirk. When it comes to the sujood of Adam, the basis of the sujood of the angels towards Adam highlights that in Islam there is two types of sujood. One is called the sujood of ibadah, the second is the sujood of ta'zeem. Notice the difference. The sujood of ibadah is the sujood of worship. That is the sujood which Zayn al-Abidin states, if mankind knew how much reward he was receiving while in sujood, he would never raise his head from sujood. That is the type of sujood where you find that Ali ibn Abi Talib achieved victory in his martyrdom. That is the type of sujood where you find that Zayn al-Abidin's flesh from his forehead was removed from how much he used to prostrate. Hence the name Sayyid al-Sajjadeen. That type of sujood is the sujood of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Yet the sujood of the angels to Adam in this verse is what? The sujood of the angels to Adam is sujood to the human in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here's the point. Because the point was what? The point wasn't so much that you're worshipping the human. No. I want to test which one of you is willing to submit to me unconditionally. Without conditions. That's why we find that here a person comes forward to Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamu alayhi on one occasion. He says to Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Adam a greater distinction than Muhammad. Why? He said, because Allah ordered the angels to do sujood to Adam. Ali ibn Abi Talib looked at him and said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given Muhammad a greater distinction than Adam. So how? He said, Allah ordered the angels to do sujood to Adam then. Whereas Allah ordered all the angels and believers to sing their praises on Muhammad. إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتُهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. Again, the point emerges here within the Quran, that sometimes people come and say, how could you do sujood to so-and-so? Within the Quran we find, did Yaqub and his sons not eventually do sujood to Yusuf? In the story of Prophet Yusuf, after Prophet Yusuf was a young man who became a slave, who became accused of adultery, who eventually became a treasurer, who eventually shared the kingdom. Eventually when he shared the kingdom, Nabi Yaqub, a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, comes towards his brother, towards his son, and he comes and performs sujood towards his son. Here someone can come and say, but Nabi Yaqub has just performed shirk. Did he perform shirk? No. Yaqub's sujood to Yusuf was in similarity to the angel's sujood to Adam. It wasn't a sujood of ibadah. It was a sujood of what? Of ta'zeem, of honoring. That we have honored Allah's Khalifa on earth, here and now. That's why whenever those who come and accuse us of doing sujood towards the wrong places, you know there are people in the Islamic world who come and attack the school of Ahlul Bayt, saying that you do sujood towards the wrong direction. When you come and look at sujood, sujood is about the niyyah. If I now come and see you praying in front of the Kaaba, understand this point, those of you who've been to Hajj will know exactly what I'm talking about. If you come now and do sujood towards the Kaaba, I can come and make a conclusion, two conclusions about you. One conclusion I can make is you're committing shirk. And a second conclusion I can make is that you're worshipping Allah. Why? Because if you look at us, some of us, someone can come from outside the religion of Islam and say, you, the Muslims, are worshipping a big black stone. They come and say you're doing sujood to a big black stone. Whereas we know we are not worshipping the stone. We are showing obedience to the Lord of the stone. That's why it's ironic when they come and tell us, you Shia do sujood on this small stone. Look at the stone you do sujood to in Mecca. Why are you complaining about my small one when there is a big black cube which you all bow down before? There is a niyyah behind every sujood. Even further on this point of sujood, if I now look at a Muslim in Hajj doing sujood, I can accuse him of shirk in another way. Do you know how? Because when you're facing the Kaaba, have you all seen where Hijr Ismail is? Aren't there prophets of God buried there? If I want to accuse someone, I can come and say to him, you're committing shirk, because you're praying towards the prophets of God. They say, no, they're just in the way of my Qibla. So it's alright for you to explain yourself and not alright for the school of Al-Muhammad. Therefore, the sujood of the angels towards Adam was known as the sujood of ta'zeem. Let's return back to the verse. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ يَسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. They all prostrated except Iblis. Question number one, was Iblis of the angels? No, he wasn't. He was within the company of the angels. There is a difference. Iblis was of the jinn, but in the company of the angels. He was seen and revered as being one of the highest within their company. In the idea that he was seen as being what? As being amongst those who would prostrate to Allah longer than all those around him. Therefore, he had occupied a prominent position where there were those there who thought that he was amongst them. Yet the Quran continues by saying what? وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ. Here is the point of discussion. What does it mean when Allah says istakbara? He became arrogant. And what is the definition of takabbur? And how many of us in this hall are affected by it and need it to be cured? When we look at takabbur, ulama of akhlaq define takabbur under three strands. They say there is a difference between ujub, kibr, and takabbur. Understand how it works. Ujub, kibr, and takabbur. Ujub means what? Ujub means self-conceit. Kibr means an inner feeling of being greater than those around. Takabbur means the expression of that feeling in public. Please understand how it works. Ujub is self-conceit. Three levels of self-conceit within ujub. The first level is when I feel that I'm doing favors to God. I'm praying. I'm praying to you. I'm fasting to you. I'm doing all these things to you. I'm expecting a reward in return. Listen, I've been prostrating all this time. Why is my life going bad? You feel like sometimes you're doing a favor to the Creator. It's a conceit you build within you. That don't you see me come in Muharram or Ramadan? Don't you see how good I am with my family members? Why is it that you don't let my exam marks be high? Why is it that you don't let me become wealthy? Why is it that you've left me in a low position? Self-conceit, the first level is when you feel you're doing a favor to God. The second level of ujub, we haven't even got to takabbur. The second level of ujub is what? Is when I make myself feel saintly. Because I pray a lot and I fast a lot, I now think I'm religious. And so I begin to think in myself, you know what? My salah is a very good salah. My fasting, I'm very good at my fasting. Zakat, I pay. Khums, I pay. Jihad, I'm not ready for yet, but I might do. And here you find that the human being builds a self-conceit. On the third level is in ujub. The third level of ujub is what? The third level is when you expect Allah to reward you for all of this. Ali ibn Abi Talib used to say there are three types of people when they worship. There is the one who worships out of fear of hell. That is the worship of a slave. Then there is one who worships because he wants Jannah. That's the worship of a businessman. Then there is the one who worships Allah because he recognizes Allah's greatness. That is the worship of a free man. In ujub is self-conceit. But then the next level is kibr. Notice we haven't even reached takabbur. Kibr is what? Kibr is an inner feeling of greatness. When you feel inside your soul you are greater than all those around you. Takabbur is when you actually express it with your mouth. That's why ulama of akhlaq say there are a number of areas which the human being may perform takabbur in. The first area, looks. Sometimes when it is kibr, you think inside yourself, I'm more beautiful than all these guys. And then takabbur is when you actually express it. I'm more beautiful than you and you. There you find in history how many people have been arrogant because of their looks. He thinks he's God's gift to the community. And you find that he praises himself about his looks non-stop. To the extent that you find that Aisha and Hafsa, wives of Rasulullah, used to come and make fun of whom? There is a verse in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى يكون خيرا منهن. It used to say, let not one group of women make fun of another group of women. Aisha and Hafsa used to make fun of whom? Salama. Why? Because she was very short. Because Salama was short, they used to make fun of her on the idea that we are better looking than you. You are a shorty, whereas the rest of us are taller. Here, this idea was what? The idea of kibr was that you had it within yourself. You felt you were better looking than everyone, but you don't express it. Takabbur is when you actually express it. Sometimes, how many of us guys sit with our friends and we're like, look bro, between me and you, I'm better looking than all of you guys here sitting. And you find that this type of idea is what? Takabbur. Number one, looks. Number two, sometimes a person is arrogant because of their wealth. So it begins where? An inner feeling. I'm more wealthy than the whole community. And if I want, I can buy out the whole community. Then one day I express that feeling. I'm more wealthy than all of you. Who are you to come and speak like that to me? You find sometimes the human being is arrogant through what? Through his wealth. Number three, you find sometimes the human being is arrogant because of his age. Age sometimes makes a person arrogant. Inside, you think to yourself, I'm 45. Who's this 25-year-old to come and lecture me? No, I'm only joking. And here you find that sometimes you may express it. You come forward and say, who is he to come and speak to me? I'm old and I've seen more than him. Arrogance can come in age. That's why Zainul Abidin, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, used to say, don't be arrogant because of your age. Why? Because if you look at someone older than you, then know that he's performed more good deeds than you. And if you look at someone younger than you, know that you've performed more sins than them. And if you look at someone the same age as you, how do you know what is in their heart before they perform an action? He used to say, don't let age be something that makes you arrogant. Number four, our nationalities make us arrogant. Inside myself, I'm thinking, us Iraqis are better than everyone. And then one day I actually express it, us Iraqis are better than all of you. And then you find some people, you find the Khaja thinking they're better than Pakistani. And Pakistani thinks he's better than Khaja. An Iranian thinks he's better than Iraqi. Iraqi thinks he's better than everyone else there is. And you find therefore that sometimes there is arrogance within what? Arrogance within nationality. That sometimes our nationality is a cause for arrogance between us. All of these come under what? They all come under the heading of the types of arrogance. That at the beginning a person may have kibr, he may keep it inside. But the insecurity emerges when he actually reveals his arrogance. Notice that if you want to find how arrogant a person is, look at their words when they become angry. Their true feelings all begin to emerge. That's why you find that arrogance is coming in 4 definitions. Imam al-Khomeini, in the book, the 40 Hadith, he defines pride by saying there is 4 types of pride. Number 1, the arrogance towards God. Number 2, arrogance towards the prophets of God. Number 3, arrogance towards the commands of God. Number 4, arrogance towards the creatures of God. The verse about shaitan falls under the first category. Because when shaitan performed his arrogance was takabbur towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Why did Allah say istakbara? Because shaitan had kept it in for a long time that he was better than Adam. So he was only at the level of kibr. He hadn't expressed it. Yet when Allah ordered him to do sujood to Adam, he came forward and said, you created me from fire and you created him from clay. Arrogance was suddenly coming out of the mouth. That's why when you look at shaitan, Nabi Isa has an interesting conversation with shaitan on this issue. Nabi Isa comes, and you know what he says? Nabi Isa comes to shaitan. He says, shaitan, if I ask Allah to forgive you, would you go and ask for forgiveness? Shaitan didn't reply. Nabi Isa went to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and said, Ya Allah, would you forgive shaitan if he asked you for forgiveness? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, yes, if he asks me for forgiveness, I am willing to forgive him. Nabi Isa went back to shaitan and said, shaitan, my Lord has promised, and his promise is the truth, that if you ask him for forgiveness, he'll forgive you. Shaitan replied, let him ask me for forgiveness first, then I'll think of asking him. That's why another incident, Nabi Nuh, and notice the prophets of God always meet shaitan because that's his biggest enemy. So he tries every way possible to finish them. Nabi Nuh meets shaitan. Nabi Nuh says, shaitan, why don't you ask Allah for forgiveness? Go and prostrate to Adam. Are you that arrogant that you can't go down in sujood towards Adam? Shaitan replies by saying what? He replies by saying, I did not do sujood to him while he was alive. Do you think I'm going to do sujood to him now that he's dead? The arrogance that emerges from shaitan is something unbelievable. And that's why in the verse there is an important point. The verse said, وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ means what? He was already a disbeliever before the incident of sujood. Many think he became a disbeliever after his incident of sujood. No. Before the incident of sujood, our 7th Imam, and Sahib al-Mizan, al-Tabatabai, he narrates this hadith. He says, before the incident with Adam, shaitan used to walk past Adam when Adam was only clay. And he would walk past and he'd look at Adam. Adam was only clay. He'd walk past and he'd say, you are something which is not nice for the eyes to look at. If I was ordered to do sujood to you, I would never prostrate before you. Sahib al-Mizan, Tabatabai, narrates Imam Musa al-Kadhim, narrating this hadith, to the extent that even the hadith go further about shaitan, that when the angels were discussing amongst themselves on the idea that one of us may disobey Allah, do you know what shaitan used to say to them? Don't worry about it, I'll look after you when you do it. This type of arrogance within the heavens. Imagine the arrogance when he is sent towards the people of the earth. Because shaitan's main point was what? You created me from fire. You created him from clay. My property can finish off his. That's why in the famous discussion Abu Hanifa had with Bahlul, which many of you know of, Abu Hanifa in his discussion with Bahlul, Bahlul came one day and sees Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa used to have 3 main beliefs. His first belief was what? His first belief was Allah will be seen on the day of judgment. Because everything that exists can be seen. His second belief was what? that all our actions are predestined by God. We have no choice in them. And his third belief was what? Shaitan will not burn in fire because he's made from fire. Bahlul, companion of seventh Imam, comes, picks up a piece of clay, throws it on Abu Hanifa's head. When the clay hits Abu Hanifa's head, Abu Hanifa is in pain, and he takes Bahlul towards the court. When he takes Bahlul towards the court, you know how Bahlul is, running around in a broomstick, jumping up and down. So the judge looks at Bahlul, looks at Abu Hanifa. He says, Abu Hanifa, what's the complaint? The reply comes back, our complaint is that Bahlul threw a piece of clay on me. Abu Hanifa, when looking at the judge said to Bahlul, did you really do this? Bahlul said, yes. So why? And Abu Hanifa says, Shaitan will not burn in fire because he's made from fire. I picked up clay, threw it on clay, and clay got hurt. Clay. And I picked up clay, and I threw it on clay, and clay got hurt. Number two, Abu Hanifa says that all our actions are predestined by God. Therefore, it wasn't me who threw the clay, God made me do it. And number three, Abu Hanifa came and said, everything that exists will be seen, and that therefore God will be seen. Can he please show me pain? Where is pain? Here therefore with Shaitan, Ali ibn Abi Talib in Nahj al-Balagha has a famous sermon, sermon 192, where he says Shaitan worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 6,000 years or more. But one piece of arrogance brought him all the way down. The question arises to the followers of Al Muhammad is, what makes you think you are greater than Shaitan? Why? Here is a creation that worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 6,000 years. Some of us in this hall became religious 2 years ago. Some of us 5 years ago. Some of us 10 years ago. Some of us only a week ago. What makes us think that we are greater than Shaitan? Likewise, on this point, there are those who today do not wear hijab. Isn't that breaking a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There are those who are today listening to music in their cars. Isn't that breaking a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There are those who earn haram money. Isn't that breaking a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There are those who come forward and attack their fellow Muslim brethren. Isn't that breaking the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Shaitan had one piece of arrogance towards Allah. He was condemned, but his CV had 6,000 years of sujood. How many of us think we are better than Shaitan in the way we live our life? Shaitan was set an example. Why? Shaitan showed us that arrogance towards God, one piece of arrogance towards God condemned him. How many may we commit before we are forgiven? Therefore, the first aspect of Shaitan, the first type of arrogance is arrogance towards God. The second type of arrogance mentioned in the Quran is arrogance towards the prophets of God. And there's no finer story about arrogance towards the prophets of God than the story of Nuh and his people. Because when you see Nabi Nuh, if you ever want to know an example about some people who come forward and say it's really hard for us to change the community, no one listens to us, the community's got backward thinking, and they think after 1 or 2 years of tabligh that should be enough. Nabi Nuh, 950 years of tabligh. 950 years of tabligh. And what does he say about his people? Listen to how arrogant not only his family is, but his people. He comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Nuh verse 7. وَإِنِّي كُلَّمَا دَعَوْتَهُمْ لِتَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ جَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ. What would they do? Every time I would call them, for them to come and listen to your message, they would come and put their hands in their ears like this. In the story of Nuh, it literally happened. Every time Nuh would come and say to them, stop doing what you're doing. Start worshipping Allah. Do you know what they would do? They'd come and put their hands in their ears literally and not listen. Metaphorically, the same thing happens today in Islamic communities, where you ask people to come and stop what they are stopping. Metaphorically, many people come, put their hands in their ears. Isn't it time now you wore hijab? Hands in the ears. The hands don't have to come in the ears. The metaphor of it is what? The metaphor is that there are some who are like the people of Nuh. When you come and tell them to wear or to change, the hands are in the ears. وَجَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ. Then what would they do? وَاسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُمْ. استغشوا ثيابهم means what? You get your clothes, you cover your head with it. Because whenever he'd come and tell them towards coming to worshiping Allah, they would get their clothes and just cover their head. Go and speak to the wall or speak to the hand. Because you know how it is when the truth hurts. We never like to be around people who tell us our faults. Isn't it true? We love to be around those who praise us. Because those who praise us make us feel happy. The moment you are around someone who shows you your faults, you are the first to remove your cloak and say, get me out of here. The people of Nuh's arrogance towards the Prophet of God was what? Was that they would get their cloak put around them. They put their hands in the ears. Then what does the Quran say? وَأَصَرُّوا وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا اسْتِكْبَارًا. They persisted in their ways. Istakbaru, istikbara means they continued being arrogant towards that Prophet of God. That sometimes arrogance is not only in the community, sometimes arrogance can be seen in the home. Nabi Nuh's wife and his son left him. Sometimes within our houses, arrogance can be seen. Nabi Nuh's wife was amongst the disbelievers. She left him towards his way. And his son, Nabi Nuh would tell him, come on the ark, come with me. I'm taking the good of the people. I'm taking the animals with me. Instead of him coming, he said, no, I'll find a mountaintop, which is higher than any flood that will affect us. The problem is that your mountains may be high, but the Lord of the mountains can destroy the same mountains he has put firmly on their pegs. And so what happens was, his son's arrogance, and his wife's arrogance, and his community's arrogance did not benefit them at all. They were all destroyed. The second type of arrogance was which one? Arrogance towards the prophets of God. The third type of arrogance is which one in the Quran? Arrogance towards the commands of God. What does this mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this beautifully by saying, وَقَارُونَ وَفِرْعَوْنَ وَهَامَانَ وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مُوسَى بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَمَا كَانُوا سَابِقِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us three examples in the time of the children of Israel of three characters who were arrogant not only towards God, no, not only towards the Prophet, no, towards the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Notice how arrogance develops. There are those who are arrogant towards God. There are those who are arrogant towards the Prophet. Then there are those, Imam al-Khumaini says, who are arrogant towards the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First one is Qarun. Why does Allah say Qarun was arrogant? Qarun was arrogant. Qarun was the cousin of Nabi Musa. But the moment he saw Nabi Musa had the popularity, he became jealous of him. Qarun had a lot of wealth. And with wealth, we are taught to spend it in the path of God. But what did Qarun do with his wealth? His wealth was so great that certain ahadith state that you needed more than 40 people just to lift the key to open his treasure chest. Just to lift what? The key to open his treasure chest. Imagine what's in the treasure chest. He used to have this much wealth. Yet what did he do? He couldn't take the fact that Musa was achieving more popularity than him. So he would go against the commands of Allah by doing what? He went to this lady who was known as an adulterous lady. And he went to her and he said to her, I want you to go out in public. When Musa is giving a lecture, in the middle of his lecture, stand up and say that Musa committed adultery with me. Now, Musa is giving a lecture, the lady comes towards him. When she comes, she says, oh people, Musa committed adultery with me. Nabi Musa looked at her and he said, who is it that put you up to this? Straight away, now that she's been paid, she said, Qarun. Nabi Musa asked Allah, he said, Ya Allah, look how arrogant he's been with your commands. You've commanded the people to remain with respect with each other. He's tried to cause a fitna that is adultery. Ya Allah, punish him. How did Allah punish him? With all the wealth that he had, his arrogance towards God's command, Allah made the earth suck him. The earth was swallowing him. As he was being swallowed, he would constantly call out, Oh Musa, help me. Oh Musa, help me. Oh Musa, help me. Yet there was no help coming towards his way. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Nabi Musa, he said to him, Musa, did you see Qarun? He said, yes. He said, did you take him as an example? He said, what do you mean? He said, look at Qarun, how arrogant he is towards my commands. He said, what do you mean? He said, look at him. When he is being swallowed by the earth, he is calling out, Musa, Musa, Musa. Had he once called out, O Lord of Musa, help me, I would have stopped the earth and allowed him to rise. Look how arrogant he can be. You can be so arrogant. وَقَارُونَ وَفِرْعَوْنَ. Fir'aun's arrogance towards God's commands. If there's a newborn male in Egypt, you kill the male. Newborn males, over 100,000 newborn males in Egypt were butchered. Because the idea of a prophecy coming that his kingdom would be taken over. Not only that, when he saw the Egyptians, when he saw the miracle of the magicians, when Musa defeated them, he comes towards them and crucifies them. Number 2, Fir'aun. Number 3, Haman. How was Haman arrogant towards God's command? Haman was arrogant because Fir'aun said to him, I want you to build me a tower where we go to the God of Musa and kill him. Listen to this proposition. What do? Build me a tower. And on this tower, the top, I want us to reach there and we kill the God of Musa. Haman builds the tower. Spiral tower, as high as you can get. Slave labor like you've never seen. As high as you can get. When Fir'aun reaches the top, he tells Haman, give me a bow and arrow. So he gives him the bow and arrow. He says, Musa's God, I'm shooting you. He gets the arrow. Look how preposterous arrogance makes you. He gets the arrow, shoots. All of a sudden, blood comes towards him. He thinks he's killed the God of Musa. All he's killed is one of the pigeons of the God of Musa. Pigeon flying by. And so this person's killed. He's taken the shot, the pigeon, the blood's fallen. He thinks he's killed the Lord of Musa. The Quran showed them as the first type of arrogance. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مُوسَى بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَمَا كَانُوا سَابِقِينَ. The first type of arrogance towards the commands of God. The fourth type of arrogance in the Quran towards the creatures of God. In which idea Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us that in history the worst of arrogance is towards God's creation. Do you know why? How many of us in this hall have read the munajat of Amir al-Mu'mineen on the 19th and 21st? What do we say? مولاي يا مولاي أنت المتكبر وأنا الخاشع وهل يرحم الخاشع إلا المتكبر. You are the mutakabbir. Does it mean you are the arrogant one? No. It means you're the only one who deserves to be arrogant. Ja'far al-Sadiq used to say, pride and superiority are the two garments of Allah. Whoever tries to wear them is making war with the owner. Why? Why do we say, أنت المتكبر وأنا الخاشع? Because I am saying you can afford to be arrogant because you don't need children and I need children. You don't need food and I need food. You don't need drink and I need drink. You don't need shelter and I need shelter. I cannot see the ants when they move in the middle of the night, but you can. I cannot answer all the supplications in the day and night, but you can. I cannot create the heavens and the earth, but you can. The sun and the mountains I cannot contain them, but you can. When I say Antal Mutakabbir, it means none of us have the right to be arrogant towards our fellow creatures because there is only one arrogant one, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Ali ibn Abi Talib says, mankind, you came from a drop of semen and you leave as a piece of dust. You do not know when you came and you do not know where you are going. So why do you walk around like you know everything? I came from a drop of semen and I leave as a piece of dust. Why then do I walk around my fellow creatures as if I am like a peacock? That's why Ali ibn Abi Talib again says in Nahj al-Balagha, have you ever seen the peacock? This is why the man is on a different level to anything around him. Have you seen the peacock? He says, do you know the peacock is the most insecure animal? Allah. Why? He says, because the peacock, it lets out its feathers to all. When you look at the peacock, all it does is show its feathers. He says, do you know why? Because it's insecure about its skinny legs. Allah. Ali ibn Abi Talib finds something no researcher can find. It's insecure because its legs are so skinny, it wants to divert the attention towards its feathers. Whenever you look at a peacock, you'll never look at the legs. You'll look at the beauty of the blue mark on the feathers, don't you? Likewise, Ali ibn Abi Talib says, this is the arrogance. When they're arrogant, it's because they're insecure about something. Because of their insecurity, speak, they take it out in arrogance. When they walk into the mosque, they walk all arrogantly. Why? He's scared. He's scared of the people looking at him in the wrong way. He's scared that people may make fun. So he walks in with arrogance. But the more arrogant you are, the more insecure. That's why the fourth type of arrogance is towards the creatures of Allah. Hence you find Rasulullah said, Abu Jahl is more arrogant than Fir'aun. What did you say? Abu Jahl is more arrogant than Fir'aun. Why? Because of the way Abu Jahl died, he showed more arrogance than Fir'aun. How? In the Battle of Badr, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud used to have a particular role. Do you know what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud used to do? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was very short. And I don't know what I've got against short people today. There's been a few, Salama and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was very short. And so what happens was, even some people, when they would stand up, when they would be sitting down, they'd still be taller than Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was very short. And so what would happen was, he'd come to the Battle of Badr. He came to the Battle of Badr and said, Ya Rasulullah, what can I do in this battle? Rasulullah replied that in your position, if you see any of the leaders of the enemies dying, go and finish him off. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud looking, Ali ibn Abi Talib has virtually finished everything off anyway. So he looks and he sees that what's left. And what he finds is Abu Jahl on the ground. So he runs towards Abu Jahl and he sits on him about to strike him. Abu Jahl looks at him and he says, I don't want you to kill me. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says to him, why? He said, I would rather prefer one of the sons of Abdul Muttalib to kill me. Why? Because he says, I don't want to go down in history as having been killed by a shorty like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. At least in your death, act a bit humble. That's why Rasulullah said when Fir'aun was dying, he tried to at least say, I believe in God. Whereas when Abu Jahl was dying, he was more concerned about the height of his killer. Look at the arrogance. That's why in that same group in Arabia, Walid ibn al-Mughira had exactly the same arrogance as Abu Jahl. They were soulmates. But their arrogance was trying to destroy Islam and those early Muslims. Walid ibn al-Mughira in the Quran, do you know how Allah describes him? If you think that I may come out a bit harsh on the minbar with some of the lines on the sons of adultery, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Walid ibn al-Mughira in Surah 68 verse 3, عُتُلٌّ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ زَنِيمٌ. Not only is he a tyrant, but he is a son of adultery. My Lord is saying, it was me. عُتُلٌّ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ زَنِيمٌ. Walid ibn al-Mughira was a son of adultery. They actually made fun of him when they found out. They said to him, you don't even know who your father is. He went to his mother. He said, Mother, what's going on? Who's my father? She said, I have to admit that I went with the slave boy because your cousins may have inherited our wealth, so I wanted to make sure that I was with someone else. That is the background of this man. Walid ibn al-Mughira was the man who heard Rasulullah reciting Surah 40 of the Quran. When he heard Surah 40 of the Quran, he went back towards whom? He went back towards Abu Jahl. He said, Abu Jahl, I've just heard something which is mesmerizing. Abu Jahl said, what is it? He said, I've heard the words of someone who is not a human being. These aren't the words of a human. Because Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira was the greatest poet in Arabia. You want to know why the Quran is a miracle? Because when the greatest poet says this book is great, that's when you know it's on a different level. Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira said, this book is a miracle. This book is something else. Abu Jahl said to him, so are you telling us you're leaving us to go to Muhammad? Are you going to leave your grand status, Walid? Are you going to leave all of us? So Walid ibn Mughira said, okay, I'll admit. His words are great, but they are the words of a sorcerer. Quran describes him in Surah Al-Muddathir, where it says, he came forward, قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ نَظَرَ ثُمَّ عَبَسَ وَبَسَرَ ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ وَاسْتَكْبَرَ. He became arrogant. فَقَالَ إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ يُؤْثَرُ. These are only the words of a magician. How did this man die? Look at the arrogance he shows. He died because what happened was he was walking one day in Arabia. He walked past a blacksmith. You know the blacksmith? He walked past the blacksmith. As he was walking, he would never actually look down when he walks, because he felt that if he looks down, he's actually becoming less than everyone else. So he looked up like this, The blacksmith, while he's working, some splinters left his work and went on Walid's feet. Walid al-Mughira was in extreme pain, but he felt that if he went down to touch his feet, he may be lower than the Arabian slaves. Let the pain continue. He gets home, he wants to quickly remove the splinter, the maid is there. How can I bend down my back? Because the Arabians, the one problem they had with salah was that salah was when you arch your back, and that was a big problem for them. So he said, how can I bend down in salah, in prostration in this way, coming towards my splinter? So he's waiting for the maid to go, he's waiting for the maid to go, he's bleeding profusely. Then he goes to his bed and sleeps. When his daughter comes home, she comes into the room, she sees blood everywhere. What's happened? He was so tired that he slept, and because he was so arrogant, there was so much blood coming out of his feet that he died because of the loss of blood. All it was a matter of was taking out splinters for you to survive. But because he was so arrogant towards the creatures around him, he did not want to come down and take out the splinters. Eventually, because of excessive bleeding, he died. The fourth type of arrogance is towards the creatures. That's why Al-Muhammad, when they came to cure arrogance, how did they cure arrogance? The first way they cured arrogance was through dua. Because when you read dua, you begin to realize you are worth nothing on this earth. When you come to the munajat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, listen to the lines you recite, and how low does it make you feel? Because this is the man who lifted Khaybar. He brought us victory at Khandaq. In Siffin, he rode through an army like a lion. In Badr, 35 of the 70 that died were because of his sword. He is known as the lion of God on earth. Yet look at him in munajat. Mawlaya ya Mawlaya, Anta al-Qawiyyu wa ana al-Dha'if. Ali ibn Abi Talib Dha'if. You are the strong and I am the weak. Who is there to help the weak except the strong? Mawlaya Mawlaya, Anta al-Jawadu wa ana al-Bakhil. You are the generous, I am the stingy. Ali ibn Abi Talib stingy? Mawlaya ya Mawlaya, Anta al-Kabir wa ana al-Saghir. You are the great, I am the small. Ali ibn Abi Talib small? Mawlaya Mawlaya, he continues in his lines highlighting what? I am Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yet even within my own life, when there is a chance to be humble, I take advantage of it. Because arrogance isn't in the makeup of Al-Muhammad. That's why at Siffin, when Muawiyah controlled the water, Muawiyah says to Amr ibn al-As, shall we give the water or no? Amr ibn al-As says, whether you give the water or you don't, Ali ibn Abi Talib would give us water if it's in his hands. When Ali ibn Abi Talib got the water in his hands, his soldiers had heard a complaint saying what? Muawiyah and his army are thirsty. Some of his soldiers thought, would Amir al-Mu'mineen give the water or no? Ali ibn Abi Talib looked at them and said, give them the usage of the water. There is no problem. He said to him, Mawla, they, when they had the water, did not give us. But now that we have the water, why are we giving them? He said, because I cannot bear to see a horse thirsty in Muawiyah's army, let alone a human being. Look at this level. That the humility within Amir al-Mu'mineen highlighted to us in the world today, that a community which is built on arrogance is a community built on insecurity. But a community which is built on humility is a community built on soft ground. Nabi Isa would ask his disciples, let me wash your feet. They'd say to him, why? He'd say, because the servants of knowledge, we have to serve them, we have to be humble with them. That's why Nabi Isa says that humility grows on soft ground, not on mountainous terrain. And that's why Zainul Abidin, within Makarim al-Akhlaq, stresses on this idea that go towards humility, for it is the cure of arrogance. Become humble with those around you. If someone is not your brother in faith, he is your equal in humanity. And that's why on one occasion the Imam walks in the middle of the night. He used to give out food and drink in the middle of the night. And when he used to give out the food and drink, what used to happen was people would not recognize him. Why? Because he would wear a hood. Amongst those people who didn't recognize him was his own cousin who used to abuse him. Day and night, his cousin used to abuse him. Zainul Abidin wouldn't say anything. He'd say, that Imam, Imam of whom? He wouldn't say anything. That Imam, the arrogant Imam, wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't say anything at all. When he died, the cousin came to Imam al-Baqir and he said, there used to be a man who used to come in the middle of the night, give me food and drink. Where is he? Imam al-Baqir said, that used to be my father who you used to abuse. You used to abuse him, he'd come back to you not with arrogance but with humility. And that's why the same Zain al-Abidin on one night, he comes towards a man who in the middle of the night says, I need water, I need water. Imam comes towards him and gives him the water. The man's eyes lock with the Imam. When they lock with each other, the man says to him, do you recognize me? And the Imam says to him, yes, of course I do. He says to him, then why do you give me water when you know what I did to your brother on the 10th of Muharram? Because the man he had given water to was the man who was amongst those who struck Ali Akbar's body when it was on the ground. How many of us would give water to the man who struck our brother's body when he's on the ground in Karbala? Yet here he comes forward and he gives them water and he says, because in our school, the school of Ahl al-Bayt, we give water to anyone who is thirsty, even if he killed our brother. And that's why when they asked him, what is your opinion about Yazid? Listen to this. Would you give an opinion, a good one, about a man who caused the beheading of your father, or caused horses to trample on your father's body, or a man who put your father's head on a spear, or a man who let people come and poke their spears on the body of Abu Abdullah? Would you? Imam Zain al-Abidin, when they asked him, what do you think of Yazid? He said Yazid was a good poet. Why? Why not just abuse him? Because Al Muhammad don't look for the bad faults in the person. If there is one good thing, then even mention it. Yazid was a good poet. That's it. And that's why the death of his brother Ali Akbar remained with him until his last days. Because those of you here in this hall, many of you have lost a brother. And you know the feeling when you've been brought up with your brother. And you know the memories you have with each other. And the worst thing is, when your brother was known at a young age, when he is known for being a humble, generous youth. Because there's a narration within the books of hadith about Ali Akbar, that Ali Akbar used to know that the Arabs, in their chimney outside their houses, if they used to let smoke emerge, it meant that if you are a poor man walking past our house, come inside. For we will give you food and drink. Ali Akbar used to tell his mother Layla, do you mind if I put the smoke outside the chimney? Because I want to be a generous host to those who walk past our house. How do you lose a brother like this? I do not know. How do you cope with a brother when you see the horses and the way they trampled on him when his feet got stuck to the stirrup of his own horse? Allahu Akbar. One of the ulama sees Abu Abdullah in his dream. When he sees him, he sees Abu Abdullah full of marks of stripes and arrows and swords. He sees Abu Abdullah, he cries and he cries and he cries when he sees him. The next night when he sees Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, he sees him with only 2 marks on his body. He says, Abu Abdullah, last night I saw you, your body was full of marks. I cried and I cried, but now I see there's only 2 marks. Imam al-Hussein said to him, when my Shia cry for me, these marks are all washed away. But there are 2 marks which will never wash away. One is that of Abbas and the other is that of Akbar. Those of you who've been to Karbala will know better than anyone here. You picture yourself in Karbala next to Abu Fadil. And picture yourself next to Ali Akbar. Sheikh al-Naini narrates in one incident, he says, I recited in Karbala. Listen to his words. This is a night for you to shed your tears for the grandson of Fatima al-Zahra. He says, I recited in Karbala for Ali Akbar. But when I recited in Karbala, I had recited his Musiba. He said, when I finished, I went home. And I had a sleep. In my sleep, I saw a dream. I saw Fatima al-Zahra within my dream. He says that when I recited the Musiba of Ali Akbar, I heard constant crying, louder than I have ever heard before in any of my Masa'ib. He said, I heard crying and crying. He said, when I saw my lady Fatima, I said to her, my lady Fatima, have I done something wrong in my Masa'ib? Why is it that you see me? She says, you have not done anything wrong. He said, so then what was that loud cry that we heard? She said, me and Abu Abdullah were at your Masa'ib when you remembered Ali Akbar. She said, while I have stopped crying, Abu Abdullah has not stopped. He is still where you have recited. She says, he'll never stop until the revenge is there for what happened to Ali Akbar. That's why on the 10th of Muharram, when Ali Akbar finally recited his adhan, he came towards Aba Abdullah. When he came towards him, Fatima al-Zahra is within this whole musibah. Whether she is here or she was in Karbala, your heart is with her tonight and her shafa'ah is with you. He came towards his father. When he came towards his father normally told the companions when they asked him to go and fight, his father normally would tell them, no, please, stay, they want to kill me. But with Ali Akbar, his father never said this. Do you know why? He never had the strength to tell his son. He had lost the strength to tell his son. His son and him had too much of an emotional attachment. Ali Akbar came and said, Father, let me fight. They embraced each other to the extent that ahadith say that he became unconscious. He became unconscious. What happened was, the father said to him, my son Akbar, before you go on the battlefield, it is difficult for a mother to see her son die. Go towards your mother Layla. Go and enter the tent and bid her farewell. He went in the tent and he bid her farewell. He embraced her. And then he embraced whom? He embraced the lady of light, Zainab alayhi salam. The lady who had lost Aoun and Muhammad now receives an embrace from Ali Akbar. He now comes to mount his horse. When he came to mount his horse, Aba Abdullah tells him, my son, come back one final time. He said, my father, tell me why should I return one final time? He said to him, my son, you do not know how it feels for a father to witness his son going to the battlefield. He came back one final time and he embraced his father. Then his father said to him, my son, go out towards the battlefield. He came out towards the battlefield. He said, Ana Ali ibn al-Husayn ibn Ali. نحن وبيت الله أولى بالنبي أطعنكم بالرمح حتى ينثني أضربكم بالسيف أحمي عن أبي ضرب غلام هاشمي علوي والله لا يحكم فينا ابن الدعي. He came out on the battlefield. Ahadith narrate to us that he came out and he fought like Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yet as he would fight, he would always turn around and say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. He would turn round towards his father and always send his salams. He would turn round. Layla couldn't tell how he was doing. Why? Because the dust of Karbala was covering the incident. The only way she could tell was by looking at the facial expression of Aba Abdullah. Imagine the only way you can tell how your son is doing in war is you look at your husband's face. If your husband is crying, then you know it's near the end. If your husband is smiling, then you know your son is doing well. She looks at Aba Abdullah and noticed a change in his facial expression. She said, Aba Abdullah, I see you becoming sad. What is wrong with my son? Aba Abdullah said to her, Layla, have patience. I see someone coming to strike your son right now. But he said to her, Layla, recite the dua of a mother. Why? He said, because the dua of a mother when she is grieving is always answered by Allah. So she recited the dua. Listen to what she said. She said, oh, you who returned Yusuf to Yaqub. Oh, you who returned Ismail to Hajar. Return Ali Akbar back to his mother. Ali Akbar managed to return. He killed 120 of the opposition. He returned back to his mother. He embraced her. He came towards Aba Abdullah. Do you know what he said to Aba Abdullah? He said, Aba Abdullah, the armor and the heat is killing me. He says, my father, my tongue is dry. Aba Abdullah took his tongue. When he took his tongue, he put the tongue with his tongue. They connected the tongues together. Do you know what Akbar said to his father? He said, my father, your tongue is drier than mine. Imam al-Husayn's tongue was drier than that of Ali Akbar. Imam al-Husayn had nothing else to say to Ali Akbar. Do you know what he said to him? He said, oh Akbar, in a moment your grandfather will satiate your thirst, will quench your thirst from the pool of Kawthar. In a moment it will come. He emerged on the battlefield. Yet this time, what happened was that some blood went over the eye of his horse. His horse went one way and then the other. And then his horse went to the army of the opposition. He called out, oh my father, come and save me. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. He called his father. Aba Abdullah, hadith narrates he didn't run, he walked. Do you know why? How hard is it for a father to walk at this moment?
He walked towards Ali Akbar, then he came near his son's body. As he was approaching Ali Akbar's body, he noticed that when Ali Akbar bid his salam, he only bid it with one hand. The other hand was on his chest. Imam al-Hussein wondered, why is the other hand on the chest? Imam al-Hussein came closer. He saw because the other hand was covering the mark where the spear had struck him. Imam turned round towards Najaf, like all of us are doing tonight. Imam turned round towards Najaf. Do you know what he said? He said, oh my father, you lifted the gate of Khaybar, but you never had to lift a spear from the chest of your son. Oh my father, come to Karbala and see what I'm seeing. The next line, and I conclude, Imam al-Hussein narrates that I saw Akbar smiling and I saw him crying. I wondered, Akbar, why is he smiling and why is he crying? My lady Fatima, this line is for you. He said, I saw Akbar smiling, I saw him crying. I said to him, Akbar, why do I see you smiling? Ali Akbar replied to me, he said, my father, I smile because I see my grandfather Ali ibn Abi Talib coming towards me, and I see my grandmother Fatima Zahra coming towards me. Now listen to this line. He said to him, Ali Akbar, then why is it that you cry? He said, because my father, for every tear that you shed, I see my grandmother Fatima slap herself on her cheek. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلب واللعنة الدائمة على القوم الظالمين. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the following dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to have humility within our lives. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be amongst the servants of the 12th Imam of our time. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to honor Fatima Zahra in this year and every year. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to follow the message of Al Muhammad in all aspects of our life. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the originators of this majlis, and all of them are marhumin. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the Surah Al-Fatiha, but before it, the loudest of salah.